Hello and welcome, students. My name is Forrester and I'm here today to do a lesson with you all. So today what we're going to be talking about is adjectives. So we're going to learn a bit about adjectives and we're going to go through it. Before we start, I want you to go quick and see if you could get a pencil and a piece of paper, because I want you all to help me out with a few of the things that we're going to be doing in this lesson. Good? So let's get started. So mainly today we're going to define what an adjective is and we're going to use it in context. Good? So we're going to explore the use of what you call comparative adjectives and superlative adjectives. And then we're going to identify those comparative and superlative adjectives using a few different writing techniques. So let's get into it. Hopefully you have your pencil and your paper out already. So an adjective is a word that describes a noun or a pronoun. So it's a describing word. So the way you would have a noun being a naming word and a verb being an action word, you have an adjective, which is a describing word. Good? So we have a little example here. We have the fluffy dog jumped into the cold water. Now I'll give you a hint. In that sentence, there are actually two adjectives. What I want you to do is see if you can see what is being described there and what word is being used to describe it. So we have the nouns, we should know what the nouns are, and the adjective will be the words that are being used to describe those nouns. So let's see the nouns first. Good? So we have two main nouns in that sentence. We have dog and we have water. What words are being used to describe those nouns there? See if you can get it. I'll give you a moment. You have an idea? So we have the fluffy dog and we have the cold water. So fluffy is an adjective and it's being used to describe the noun, and the noun in this case is the dog. Cold is an adjective that's being used to describe the temperature of the water, and it's describing the noun, which in this case is the water. So I have two pictures here. So both are of dogs, but only one is fluffy. So this is where the adjectives will come in, when you're describing different things with different characteristics. So if I told you I was referring to the fluffy dog, which dog would it be? Would it be the dog on my left? Would it be the dog on my right? It would be the dog on the right, because that's the one that is showing that fluffiness. Good? And we have two cups of water here, well, a cup and a kettle of water. So we have one with ice water and we have one with steaming from a kettle. So which one would be the cold water that was being referred to by the adjective on a slide previous? It would be the one to my left. That's the one that has the cold water in it. So that's how the adjectives work. They describe the noun and they give more meaning to what you are writing or what you are reading. Right? So you can't have just water, or you could have the cold water, you could have the warm water, you could have the steaming hot water. And those would be the different adjectives that you can use to describe that. Good. So what we have here is we have a few examples of the different things that adjectives can describe, the different types of adjectives that they are, and just a few examples. So we have color, size, shape, taste, odor, which is smell, texture, the way it feels, sound, number, the weather. Good? So for color you have, well, any color you could think about can be an adjective. Good? So you can see that the house is purple, and that purple there is describing the color of the house, so it would be an example of an adjective used for color. You could have shape, so round. So if you have something that is round, if you say the ball is round or the toy is round, you know the basic shape of the toy. Good? Taste. So any food that you have, the way you would describe that food would also use adjectives. So if you say this food is sweet or bitter, or if your mom come and ask you how the food is tasting and you could say it's a little bit bland, it needs more salt, then the word bland there would also be an adjective describing the current taste of the food. And what you'd be telling her is you need to add more salt to that. Good? And you have odor, so the way something smells, texture. So again, furry, like what we used before for the dog. So if you touch that dog, the fur on it would be, you'd know the feeling Good? And the adjective there would be used to describe that feeling when you play with that dog and the dog is fluffy. Good? So you have all these different types, and I want you to go and learn a few more, because there are innumerable numbers of different adjectives that you can learn, that you can use. And I promise you, using these will help make your sentences and your writings better as you go on. Good. So we know what an adjective is, that it's a describing word, it describes a noun. What we are going to do now is we're going to identify a few of the adjectives that there are in the sentences I'm going to present with you. So we're going to have the sentence, we're going to read it together, and I want you to identify whatever adjective you see. And write it down on the page that I asked you to take out previously, so that you know you will have it right there. Good? So I'll give you a chance for each. So number 1, the vicious dog tried to attack the black car as it passed by it in the road. So the vicious dog tried to attack the black car as it passed by it in the road. So see if you can identify if there's 1, 2, 4, how many other adjectives there are, and take the time and write them down and see if you can get them. So remember, look for the nouns and look for the words that are describing those nouns. So let's see, hopefully you got it. Right, so we had 2 here. We had vicious, because it's telling you what kind of dog it is. It's not a playful dog, it's not a dog that's very laid back, it's a vicious dog, so it's attacking that car. And another adjective, one of color, which is telling you the color of the car that is actually being attacked by said dog. So we have 2 adjectives in this first sentence, one describing the kind of dog it is and one describing the color of the car that is attacking. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the second one now. So as a little hint, I'm going to tell you the different nouns that are going to be described, and then I want you to analyze that sentence and see what words are being used to describe the things in this sentence. So read it through. My mother bought me a beautiful blue dress with green trimmings and silver stars along its side. My mother bought me a beautiful blue dress with green trimmings and silver stars along its side. So there are a few different nouns in there, a few different things that are going to be described. So we have the dress, so pay attention for adjectives that tell you more about that dress. The trimmings on the dress would be another set of things that you have to look for the adjectives describing, and the stars. So those are your 3 hints. Those are the 3 things that are going to be described in this particular one. So I want you to take your time, take your pencil, do whatever, write it down or know it in your head, and see if you can get the adjectives that describe those 3 things there. Good, I'll give you a moment. Good. So let's see how many you will manage to get, if you manage to get them all. Good. So we have beautiful as our first one. So beautiful and then blue, both describing the dress. So beautiful is telling you the fact that the dress is a very nice dress, a very pretty dress. Good. The blue tells you the color of the dress. So if it was beautiful red, then you would know it's a nice dress, and the dress is red instead. This time it's telling you that the dress is blue, right? With green trimmings. So it has trimmings, but again, the trimmings could be of any color. But this particular dress, the trimmings themselves are green. And silver stars along its side. So it's telling you the color of those stars that there are on the dress itself. So hopefully you managed to get all that would have been present in this particular one. So for the last one now, we're going through it again together. Read it with me when you get a chance. If you already know what the adjective is, you could write it down. If not, when we finish go through it, I will give you a little hint as to what is being described, and then you can see if you can pick out the adjectives in this last one. So, my father made a beautiful looking pot of stewed chicken, but it was salty. Read it again. My father made a beautiful looking pot of stewed chicken, but it was salty. So, the thing that is being described in this one is the stewed chicken, the pot of stewed chicken. So I want you to take your time and analyze and see if they're talking about the color, about the taste, about whatever it is with this particular pot of stewed chicken. And take your time. If you want to write it down, tell it to your brother, your father, your mother, your sister, whoever. Make sure you have the information, you know what it is is being described here. So let's go. So we have beautiful. So just like with the second one, beautiful is being used to tell you how it's looking. So if you would have seen a really good pot of stewed chicken at some point in your life, you would know how lovely it can look and how appealing it can look to your eyes, make you want to eat it. So it's telling you that it's that kind of stewed chicken here now. Unfortunately, the way it looks and the way it tastes are not the same. So it looked very appealing, but it tasted salty. Good? So there was too much salt in it, and the adjective here, salty, is being used to describe the taste of that stewed chicken. So you have the way it looks, and you have the disparity between the way it actually tasted. And that's how the adjectives here come in. Good? So it's telling you more about what is being described, about what the noun is. So let's move on. So I'm going to give you a few pictures here now. And what I want you to do is the first thing that you can use to describe that picture, I want you to either say it or write it down. So there's not one right answer necessarily, because it could be different for different people. But the picture will be your basis. So whatever picture comes up here, what you think you can use to describe it, you can write it down, you can say it, whatever. So let's go. Right. So we have a picture here, shark, guy deciding to surf, very close to it. Don't worry, it's not a real picture. And what can you use to describe this particular picture? What word can you use? One word. Let's see what I had. Right, so you have a word like scary. So it's describing this picture, and it might even be describing how the guy would have felt in that moment. Good, but somebody else might decide to say it's amazing or it's cool. And these are adjectives as well that can be used. So it's not all the time that there will be one adjective that is perfect for any situation, because it's subjective. It depends on the person who's viewing the thing. So the stewed chicken from before, I might think it's salty. You might prefer it like that, so you might think it's just right. It really depends on the person. So let's do another one. Good. So we have an island, we have the sea, we have everything here. One word that you can use to describe this particular picture now. Take your time, write it, say it, whatever. The word I chose to use, again, beautiful. So it's describing the scenery, describing this particular picture as being especially beautiful. So you have the nice water, you have the landmass, untouched by buildings and all of those different things. You have the shore, and to me, the adjective that I chose to use, again, was very beautiful. Let's go on. Right. So this one, I'm giving you adjectives to use. We have something to read, and we'll read it together. We have a list of words for you to input into the blank spaces. So a lot of you would have come across something like this, in whether it's with adjective as your topic or something else, where you are given the list and you just have to use your judgment, use your appropriate thinking, and put them in. So let's read the words first. We have kind, big, scary, hard, sweet, long, delicious, and black. Good, so those are the words that we'll be putting. Each word is to be used once, and the way it fits best will be according to your discretion and what you think. So let's read through together. One day, while walking along a something and winding road, I came across a something looking house with gargoyle statues made of something stone, with eyes painted something. Even though I was scared, there was a something smell coming from inside the house, and it made me want to go inside. I summoned my courage and knocked on the front door, hoping for a something person to answer the door and offer me a something treat. Good. So we have our list, we have it. I'll read through it one more time, but while I'm reading through it, I want you to be analyzing it and see what can go where, and then we'll go through them one by one. So they won't all appear at once. They'll have some time to reconsider and to rethink. One day, while walking along a something and winding road, I came across a something looking house with gargoyle statues made of something stone, with eyes painted something. Even though I was scared, there was a something smell coming from inside the house, and it made me want to go inside. I summoned my courage and knocked on the front door, hoping for a something person to answer the door and offer me a something treat. Good. So now we're taking it line by line and filling it in as we go. Remember, it's good if you're using the words, cross them out as you go to know when you've already used one. So, one day while walking along a long and winding road. So that's the adjective I chose to use to describe the length of the road. So they're telling you what the road was like as you were walking along it. Good? So hopefully you have that one. Moving on. And as you can see, long has now been crossed off. So I came across a something looking house. So what do you think could be used there? So we have a set of words remaining, and the one that I chose to use, scary. So it's telling you the type of house that it was. It wasn't a very inviting house. It was actually a very scary looking house. Good? Once again, as we go, we cross off to make sure we don't use it again or we don't forget, because this is a particularly long piece, right? So I came across a scary looking house with a something gargoyle statues made of something stone. And the one we chose to use after with is big. So they're telling you that they weren't very tiny gargoyle statues, they were actually very large. So they were big gargoyle statues, right? And made of what kind of stone? What word could we use there to describe that stone appropriately? Let's see. With hard stone. Good. So the gargoyle itself wasn't mud or wasn't clay. It was actually very durable stone. And now with eyes painted something. So that word painted there actually serves as a hint, because if it's painted, it's advising you that more than likely it's a color. Good, so yeah, you can see what colors we have on top there, and you can choose one from that list to put in. As far as I can see, there's only actually one color there, and that would be black. So the eyes of the gargoyle, which are made of stone, were painted black. Good, moving on. So even though I was scared, there was a something smell. So now you have the word kind remaining, sweet, delicious, and we just used black. So everything we have remaining there, which one will fit the best, right? So there was a something smell coming from inside the house. Could it be a kind smell? Could it be a sweet smell, a delicious smell? Well, it's actually a sweet smell. So something may have been baking, something that invited the writer to the house, even though the house was scary with all these different things that would generally turn you away. Good? So it's a sweet smell coming in from inside the house, and it made them want to come closer. Right? And it made me want to go inside. I summoned my courage and knocked on the front door, hoping for a something person. So it's either a kind person or a delicious person. So I don't know about you, I have never eaten people. I believe that appropriately here, it would be kind. And I'm not sure if you would have heard it before. If you are confident in the answers that you have given up until this point and there's only one remaining, then the last answer is generally obvious. So we have person to answer the door and offer me a delicious treat. So we have used every word, we have completed this particular paragraph, we have utilized the adjectives that we were given. So that is how it can be used. So you could have just said, one day I was walking along a road and I came across a house with gargoyle statues. I was a little bit scared. but there was a smell coming from inside the house and it made me want to go. And you could go on like that. But the adjectives add some color, add some flavor to the writing that you use. So it spices it up a little bit and makes it more appealing for somebody who is reading. It's also able to help you use your imagination more, because if you are writing about something and you are describing it accurately to your reader, then your reader can get a better picture in their mind of what it is exactly you are describing. Good. Right. So yes, you rock. So now we are moving on to our second major objective, which is comparative and superlative adjectives. So for comparative now, they are adjectives that compare two things in relationship to each other. Good? So we have an example here. We have James is taller than John. As I said, adjectives usually describe nouns. So we have two main nouns here. We have James and we have John. There's a word there, the word taller, which is an adjective and specifically a comparative adjective. Good? What it does is it tells you the relationship between the height of James and John, and it tells you that James is the taller one. Good? So you can also reverse it and say that John is shorter than James, because we already know that James is taller. So when you're using comparative adjectives, you are describing something in comparison to one other thing, and I want you to remember that. Comparative adjectives compare it to one other thing. So it's two things being compared here, based on whatever quality you're talking about. Good? Right. My sister is faster than I am. So what you're comparing there, what nouns are being compared to what? So you have, in this case, you have your sister and you have you, right? So it's two different things that's being compared, and in what way are they being compared? So my sister is faster than I am. So you're talking about speed now. So it's no longer about height, you're talking about speed, right? So you know she's fast, and in comparison to you, she is the faster one. So that's where comparative adjectives, comparative, compare. Good? So they compare one thing to another thing based on whatever is being described about them. Good. So we have an example here where we have one person being tall, one person being taller. Good? So like the previous example where you have James and you have John, you will have one being taller than the other one. This is how it would be. You're comparing those two things based on height. Right? So now we have superlative adjectives. So where comparative compared two things to each other, what a superlative adjective does, it compares, it is an adjective that is at the highest or lowest end of a quality, right? They are used when the subject is compared to a group of objects. So what is it that they mean by the highest or lowest end of a quality? Good. So you can have two people, and one of those people is taller than the other. But then you can have a third person, or maybe you have a group of 5 people and there's one person who is specifically taller than everybody else. What you can say is that person, whoever that person is the tallest. So they are the highest end of the quality of height that we are dealing with in this particular example. So James is the tallest of all his friends this time. So instead of just being taller than one person, now we know that in all of James's friends, he is actually the tallest one. The quality of height in James is the highest of all his friends. And by that logic, tallest there would be a superlative adjective. Good? So we had taller being the comparative and its superlative form being tallest. And of course, the regular adjective there would have been tall. Right. So Shania is the prettiest girl I know. So we have a sentence there, and we have Shania being the noun here that's being compared to the entire group. So in the entire group of all the girls that the writer would have known, Shania is the prettiest. So this is the other superlative adjective that we will be dealing with. So you had tallest, now you have prettiest. So of the entire group, Shania is the one that would have won out in this particular quality of physical appearance. Good? Right. Once again, we have tall, taller, tallest. So if you were only dealing with numbers 1 and 2, you could say that number 2 is taller than number 1. Comparative, you're comparing those two. But you're dealing with the 3, so you would say that number 3 is the tallest of all the basketball players. Good. So now we're going to talk about how some of these adjectives are formed and how you can identify a few of them. So there are different rules depending on the number of syllables that an adjective has to how it's formed and how it can be read. So for one syllable adjectives, we add ER for the comparative and EST for the superlative. So you would have noticed before where we had tall, taller, tallest. Taller, which is the comparative, ends in ER, and tallest, which is the superlative, ended with EST. So that is one way you can use to identify and even form adjectives depending on what the word is. So if the adjective has a single vowel before the final consonant, it must be doubled before adding the ending. So we have tall, taller, tallest is just one example here now, right? The regular adjective, the comparative form when you're doing more than, well, 2 people, and superlative when you're doing a group. 2 or more syllables now. Adjectives with 2 or more syllables form their comparative by putting more in front of the adjective, and the superlative by putting most in front of it. So there are a few exceptions to this rule. You have heavy, heavier, heaviest. But generally speaking, you have the comparative form when there's 2 or more syllables being formed by putting more, and the superlative formed by putting most. So we have important, we have more important, and we have most important. So it's not important, important or important-ist. No. You form it with more or you form it with most. Good? And we have tangled, we have more tangled, and we have most tangled. So depends on the syllables, the rules changed. And of course, there are exceptions to every rule. So they are the irregular one where you have things like good, better, and best. Right? So you have good being the regular form, the standard form. You have better, and then you have best being the comparative and superlative forms. So exceptions to every rule. Right. What we have here is a nice chart. We will not be going through every single one, but we will pick out a few of them and talk about what they relate to what we've spoken about before. So you have long, longer, longest. So one syllable, you have your ER, you have your EST, normal. Let's take, you have cold, colder, coldest, or you have something like interesting, more interesting, and most interesting. Regular, comparative, superlative. And then, of course, you have the irregular ones at the bottom, like what I described with good, better, best, bad, worse, worst. Good, so you have different ones, and it's really important for you to learn the rules, learn the exceptions, and practice not only using them, but identifying them as well. Right. So what we're going to do is that same practice. We're going to find out if they are comparative or if they are superlative. So remember, comparative, it's 2 things. Superlative, it's more than 2, 3 or more. Good? And the adjective will be the word in red, so you get to decide whether you think it's comparative or superlative. To save time on your paper, what you can do is either put a C or a S. So you'll know C for comparative, S for superlative, and it will save you some time and get you to interact with it a little bit easier. So let's go. My mother bought me a cheaper phone than she did for my sister. Good, so cheaper here is the adjective. What you have to decide is whether it's comparative or superlative. Think about it. Right, so that's actually comparative because you're comparing the cost of the phone that she bought for you to the phone that she bought for your sister. Right, so comparative, comparing only 2 things there. Next one. The blue whale is the largest animal in the world. So, are you comparing the blue whale to one thing there, or are you comparing it to many? So you have a largest. You can look at what it ends with. There are many different ways to identify whether it's comparative or superlative if you're paying attention. So the blue whale is the largest animal in the world. Comparative or superlative? Let's see. Right, so this one would be an example of a superlative adjective. So it's comparing that blue whale to every other animal there is, and therefore it's a larger group than just two, and it's superlative. Right. My country is the most beautiful island in the world. So my country is the most beautiful island in the world. So this one has neither ER or EST. So what you have to do is remember the rules that we spoke about before and see if what it is comparative or superlative. Let's see if you could get it. Remember, you just need to write the C or the S so that you know and I know what we're dealing with. So let's see. So good. So this is another example of a superlative adjective. So it's comparing your island to every other island that there is in the world. And because of that major comparison there, what you're doing is forming a superlative adjective. Good? Excellent. So now you're going to use your own creativity, because what you have to do is choose any suitable adjective to finish your sentences, right? I will give you one option that I chose to use, but yours does not have to be the same as mine. It can be very different. It can turn out to be the same, but I want you to be creative with it so that you know that you can use adjectives that are in your head to finish these sentences as well. Right? So there isn't only one correct answer. So let's go. So Joshua is a very something boy. So you could just write down the word that you can use to complete this sentence. And as I said, it does not have to be the same as the one that's going to pop up here. There are a lot of correct answers, a lot of possibilities. So good. Joshua is a very something boy. Sophia is the something girl in her entire class. So Sophia is the something girl in her entire class. Remember to choose appropriately between comparative and superlative, or even just regular. Good. So next one we have, my parents are the something people in the world to me. Good. Moving on to the next one. Out of all the sports in the world, I find that football is the something. Going on. I think that red is something than blue, but purple is the something of them all. So good, we would have gone through all the sentences, and what you have to do now is take the time and think about what word could be used appropriately in these. So remember to decide whether it's comparative or superlative or even regular, and put them in as appropriate and how they will sound good in these particular sentences. So let's go. Joshua is a very tall boy. Good, so you could have tall, you could have small, you could have good, you could have short, you could have thin, right? You could have fast. It depends on what you put in. It has to be a regular though. It cannot be a comparative or superlative because you are not comparing Joshua to anybody here or anything. Right? So keep that in mind, and hopefully you would have gotten one that's appropriate. Next one. Sophia is the something girl in her entire class. So we have kindest being used there. So Sophia is the kindest girl in her entire class. It's telling you about Sophia. It has to be a superlative adjective being used because you're talking about Sophia and her entire class all there. Right? Next one. My parents are the something people in the world to me. And there we have most important. That's the one I chose to use. You may use something different. So you may use kindest here instead, because kindest can also work here as well. Right? Or you can have the most fun, or however it is that you're doing it, right? It really depends on what you decide to put in here. Has to be superlative though, because you are using it with the entire world. Next one. Out of all the sports in the world, I find that football is the something. And that something that I chose to put in was most exciting. Good? So most exciting was what I chose to use, and you could have used something else, as I keep reminding you. And lastly, this one has 2 different adjectives to be used, whether it's comparative or superlative. Hopefully you have learned enough by now that you can decide which is which, or if both are the same thing, or if one is irregular, or however, and you would have put it in. So I think that red is prettier than blue, but purple is the best of them all. So what we have here is we have a comparative, and we have an irregular and superlative in the last slot there. So it will depend on what you would have used. You could put red as the worst, red is the brightest, whatever, red is the brighter, sorry, whatever, it depends on you. And purple, you can have something, but it has to be a comparative on top and a superlative underneath. So very good, excellent. Let's go through a little review. An adjective is a word that describes a noun, remember, like a noun is a naming word, and a verb is an action word, an adjective is a describing word, right? Comparative adjective here compares 2 things. So if it's only 2 things, it can be used there. It cannot be used for more than 2 things, right? And in relation to each other. A superlative adjective is an adjective that expresses the highest or lowest end of a quality and is used when the subject is compared to a group. So a group being 3 or more people there, you can use the superlative form of any given adjective. So hopefully you all learned something, you all went through a review and you all had a good time. And if you need more, have your parents visit learn.moe.gov.tt for your ECCE primary and secondary school needs. Thank you very much.